My family never supported me, even when I was homeless. Now that I own a business, they want to invest in my success. But where were they when I had nothing to eat? There was a silence more deafening than the howling wind that tore through the rusted metal frame of the bus stop I called shelter for 2 endless weeks. It wasn't the kind of silence that followed a deep conversation or preceded a thoughtful word. No, this was the silence of absence, of unreturned calls, of messages that showed read, but never answered. It was the sort of stillness that gnawed at you like a parasite, feeding on the last shreds of hope clinging to your ribs when you hadn't eaten in 3 days. This silence didn't just echo, it screamed. And it screamed loudest in the moments between dusk and dawn, when the world fell asleep behind drawn curtains, and I sat beneath the orange flicker of a broken street lamp, pretending not to cry. I remember the first time I picked up the phone with trembling fingers, the screen slick from the cold and from the sweat on my palms. I'd stared at my brother's name for almost 10 minutes before pressing call. We hadn't spoken in months, but he was blood. He'd known me before I had dreams, before I learned how cruel the world could be. If anyone would answer, it would be him. When his voicemail clicked on, smooth and upbeat, I left a message so carefully worded it barely hinted at the desperation bubbling under the surface. I said I just needed a place to crash for a few days, promised I wouldn't be a burden, said I had plans to turn it all around. The call was never returned. Next came my mother. Her number was burned into my memory, a melody I could hum in my sleep. I hadn't spoken to her since I dropped out of college, a choice she never approved of, especially after I chased what she called a childish fantasy of owning a business, instead of climbing some corporate ladder. When I called her, she picked up, but her voice was sharp, clipped with irritation, not concern. She asked me what I expected her to do. She told me I had always been too idealistic, that maybe now I'd finally learn how the real world worked. When I mentioned sleeping in my car, her sigh cut through me like a blade. "You always make everything so dramatic," she said. "There are shelters, aren't there? You need to figure things out like an adult." She hung up before I could answer. That was the day I stopped calling, stopped begging, stopped believing that blood meant anything more than shared DNA. If anything, it became a stain I wanted to scrub clean. I learned that loneliness didn't begin when people left. It began when you realized they were never really there to begin with. In the weeks that followed, I became an expert in invisibility. I mastered the art of looking harmless, learned how to linger near fast food places until someone left half a sandwich on the tray. My pride, once a towering monument, I refused to dismantle, crumbled brick by brick each time I dug through a trash bin, praying for something that wouldn't make me sick. I stole napkins from diners to keep myself clean and slept with my back to the wall, always with one eye open. The city didn't care that I once dreamed of boardrooms and brands. It didn't care that I had a vision. It only cared that I didn't get in the way. The cold bit deeper each night, and the hunger became less of a sharp pain and more of a dull companion, ever present, ever whispering. I lost track of the days. My reflection turned into someone I didn't recognize, someone hollow-eyed, gaunt, with skin pulled too tight over cheekbones that used to be soft. And yet somewhere in that haze, the ember inside me didn't die. If anything, the darkness made it glow brighter. There was a moment, small, insignificant to anyone else, that became the pivot point of my life. I was at the back of a coffee shop, hiding from the rain, pretending to scroll through a phone with no service. A woman dropped her wallet near my feet as she rushed out. Reflexively, I picked it up and sprinted after her. She thanked me with a stunned look, as though she hadn't expected honesty from someone like me. Her fingers pressed a $5 bill into my palm before she disappeared. I stared at that bill for an hour. Not because it was money, but because it was the first unearned kindness I'd received in months. It reminded me I was still human. That same day, I used a library computer to start something I hadn't dared to attempt in a long time. A business plan. Not the perfect kind I used to draft in college with neat bullet points and hypothetical numbers. This one was raw, messy, and real. It was born from the kind of clarity that only suffering breeds. I didn't have startup capital or a network or a co-founder who wore polo shirts and said things like leverage growth. I had nothing but an idea, a steel spine, and memories of every door slammed in my face. It started with graphic design. I'd taught myself on borrowed laptops and cracked software back in college. I found a free platform that let me take freelance gigs, And for the first few weeks, I worked like a machine. Slept 2 hours a night, took jobs others wouldn't touch, and bent over backwards to meet deadlines. When clients asked for revisions, I delivered twice the edits. When they underpaid, I bit my tongue and smiled, building a portfolio instead of resentment. Slowly, reviews piled up, ratings ticked higher, clients returned, money started trickling in, just enough for food that wasn't expired, a motel room where I didn't sleep with one shoe on in case I had to run. Months passed. I reinvested everything, bought better equipment, learned marketing. I registered a name, Ash and Ember Design Company, a tribute to what I'd been through. Because ashes don't mean death. Sometimes they're the only proof that fire once lived. And embers? They're how it begins again. From a motel room desk, I expanded, took on collaborators, people like me dismissed, overlooked, hungry in more ways than one. We built each other up. In less than 2 years, we had a storefront office and clients that included real names, real corporations. I gave jobs to the same kinds of people I used to sleep beside in alleyways, people who just needed one break. I never forgot where I came from, but apparently neither did my family, because now they remembered me. Oh, how they remembered me. My brother showed up first, smiling, pretending to casually check in. Said he'd heard I was doing big things, and maybe we could partner. My mother called 3 days later, her voice sweeter than molasses, telling me she was proud of how far I'd come. As if she'd been there, holding my hand through the nights I screamed silently into my own palms. Aunts and uncles followed. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. They showed up like vultures with designer sunglasses and stories about how they always knew I was special. They wanted to invest. They wanted to celebrate my journey. They wanted to rewrite history, standing beside me like they hadn't once crossed the street to avoid me when I was begging for change. But I remember. I remember the rain that soaked me through while I slept in parking garages. I remember the stale bread, the stomach cramps, the pitying glances of strangers who saw a ghost walking. I remember every text left unread, every voicemail unanswered, every excuse that wrapped judgment in a ribbon and handed it to me like a gift. And now, as I sit behind my desk in an office I built brick by brick from the ruins of my own despair, they sit across from me in tailored suits, sipping lattes I paid for, talking about family unity. They say we should put the past behind us. They say now is the time to come together. They say blood is thicker than water. But blood didn't feed me when I was starving. Blood didn't keep me warm when frost formed on my breath at night. Blood didn't believe in me until the world did. And as I lean back in my chair, watching them spin their honeyed lies, I realize this isn't just a business. It's my vindication. And I am no longer the one begging. There's something oddly theatrical about watching people reintroduce themselves to the version of you they never thought they'd meet. Like suddenly, they're all actors trying to improvise a script for a scene they were never a part of. Their eyes scan your office walls, fingers brushing over framed testimonials, brand logos, and the subtle glint of success, as if by touching them they could absorb some piece of the journey they refused to walk. They keep pausing at the photo of me holding the oversized scissors at the ribbon-cutting ceremony last spring. I remember that day vividly, not because of the cameras or the handshakes, but because I did it alone. No family in the crowd, no one beaming from the front row. Just me, holding the ribbon taut against wind that wouldn't stop screaming, and cutting it clean in half like every tie that had once bound me to a history I no longer claimed. Now, across from me, my cousin Anthony chuckles in his tailored charcoal blazer, trying to make small talk about childhood memories he thinks we share. He brings up the summer we all went to the lake, how I nearly drowned, how everyone laughed about it afterward. He leaves out the part where they laughed while I was choking on muddy water, fighting to stay afloat because no one jumped in. I remember that too. I remember everything. "You've done real good for yourself," he says, leaning back with a casual confidence that reeks of assumption. "Always knew you had it in you." I told Ma, "Watch, they're going to do something big one day." And here you are. Here I am. There's a silence that stretches between us like a chasm, wide and bottomless. I don't fill it. I've learned silence has its own language, and right now, it speaks louder than any carefully rehearsed speech about reconciliation or redemption. I let them sweat in it, let them fidget with their watches and shuffle their designer shoes on the polished floor, Uncomfortable because I'm not begging. I'm not asking for scraps. I'm not at their mercy. They are at mine. Family is important, my mother says after a long pause. Her voice is soft, the kind of tone you use when trying to wrap barbed wire in velvet. I know things weren't always easy, but we had our own struggles too, you know. It wasn't like we didn't care. I arch a brow. Didn't care? When I was sleeping in my car, body curled like a question mark under a thin blanket that smelled like mildew and desperation, where was that care? When I wandered grocery stores pretending to shop just to feel the heat on my skin, starving in the aisles but knowing theft meant jail or worse, where was the care then? When I sat in emergency rooms just to feel safe, not sick, praying a nurse might ask if I was okay, where was that fabled family concern? They care now that I can offer them something. Now that my name is mentioned in meetings, my logo etched on packaging, my inbox full of opportunity. Now that I am a name worth saying aloud. Let's not get caught up in the past, my uncle pipes up, voice laced with a practiced optimism. We've got a chance here to do something great together. Expand, grow, family business, you know? Make it a legacy. Legacy. I nearly laugh out loud at the word. They want to attach themselves to a legacy they had no hand in building. Want to co-sign on a life they abandoned at its lowest point. I look at their eager faces, each trying to rewrite the story they weren't in. It's not nostalgia. It's strategy. They've mistaken my forgiveness for amnesia. But I remember. I remember nights on the train, pretending I was just a traveler waiting for my stop, though I had nowhere to go. I remember picking up part-time work, cleaning offices after hours, scrubbing floors while executives walked past me without eye contact. I remember the humiliation of being invisible, of trying to stay clean without a shower, of trying to stay sane in a world that only notices you once you're valuable to them. The thing is, I did die. That version of me. The one who believed in unconditional love. The one who thought family would catch me when I fell. That person starved to death on a Tuesday morning when I skipped another meal to buy data for my phone, hoping to land a freelance job that would keep me out of a shelter one more night. They died quietly, replaced by someone colder, harder, unbreakable. And yet I smile now, a calm, calculated smile, one that doesn't quite reach my eyes. I appreciate you all coming in, I say, folding my hands atop the sleek desk that's more symbolic than functional. But let's be clear, this is my business. I built it, from scratch, from pain, from empty wallets and cold nights, from all the times you said no, or worse, nothing at all. My voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. The weight of it is heavy enough to crush the illusions they walked in with. I didn't get here because of support. I got here in spite of the lack of it. I learned how to market because I couldn't afford a professional. I learned branding because no one believed in mine. I became a strategist because every plan I pitched to others was dismissed. And I learned endurance because all I had left was the ability to keep going when no one else thought I would. Anthony shifts in his seat. My mother exhales slowly, clasping her hands in her lap. My uncle mutters something about, the past is the past, but I don't let it land. I continue. You didn't show up when it mattered. You didn't ask how I was when I disappeared. You didn't check in when I dropped off the radar. You only resurfaced when you saw my name trending. When your friends started asking if we were related. When your co-workers brought up my company in meetings. That's not family. That's opportunism. The words hang in the air, suspended like smoke from a fire they thought had burned out years ago. I stand slowly, walking to the wide windows behind me. The city stretches beyond the glass, indifferent, sprawling, relentless. I remember walking its streets like a ghost, looking up at office buildings and wondering if I'd ever sit behind glass walls again. Now, I am the one behind them, but I never forgot the chill on the outside. When I had nothing, I became everything, I say without turning. And now that I am everything, I owe you nothing. There's a tension in the room so thick it could be sliced with a knife. My mother rises slowly, her expression tight with wounded pride. We're still your family, she says, whether you like it or not. I turn back, meeting her gaze directly. No, I say, you were my relatives. Family is who shows up when you have nothing, and none of you were there. They leave after that, one by one, the door clicking softly behind each exit. No shouts, no arguments. Just the slow, quiet unraveling of a lie they had told themselves for too long, that they could return without cost, claim a seat at a table they never helped build. I sit down again, letting the silence settle like dust in the corners. It's not bitter. It's clean. Final. Later, I pull out the worn notebook I kept during those darkest days. It's frayed, smudged, water-damaged from rain and tears alike, but it holds the blueprint of my journey. The scribbled designs, the wild ideas, the sketches of logos drawn with blunt pencils and hope. It's proof that even when I had nothing, I had something they didn't. Vision. I flip to a page near the middle, one I always return to when I feel the ghosts stirring. It's a quote, written in my own hand, circled 3 times with angry strokes. They will only remember you when you become what they couldn't imagine. Let them. I smile, not out of triumph, but out of recognition. Because I've become everything they couldn't imagine, and they will remember me for it. There is a moment in every self-made life when the echoes grow louder than the applause. People often think the greatest burden of success is managing the expectations that come with it, or the responsibility of those who now depend on you. They are wrong. The heaviest burden is remembering, not just the sharp cinematic flashbacks that wake you in the middle of the night or creep into your quiet moments with cruel precision. No, the true weight comes from the quiet remembering, the way a certain smell, a certain time of day, a certain tone of voice can resurrect a version of you that no longer exists but never really died. It was late. The office was quiet, save for the subtle hum of the HVAC and the distant sounds of the cleaning crew moving through the lower floors. I liked to work alone past midnight, when the world forgot itself and the silence became sacred. The amber desk lamp cast a golden halo over the paperwork in front of me. Contracts, projections, an email from a vendor in Tokyo needing clarification on branding assets. I handled it all mechanically, efficiently, but my mind wasn't in it. Not tonight. Tonight, I was remembering. Earlier that afternoon, a letter had arrived. A handwritten one. That alone should have raised suspicion. No one writes by hand anymore unless they want to invoke some old-world sincerity. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, and bore my mother's slanted handwriting. My assistant had brought it in with a small smile. No idea what it carried. I had left it untouched on the corner of my desk for hours, like a landmine whose detonation was inevitable. I finally opened it after dark, once the office emptied, and the walls were mine again. The words were careful, scripted in sorrow but lined with subtle manipulation. She apologized for the past, not directly, of course, but in a roundabout way that placed as much blame on confusion and tough love as it did on circumstance. She said she had watched my interviews online, read the articles, seen the clips where I talked about resilience and starting from nothing. She said she was proud, said the family was proud, said they wanted to understand, to be part of the journey moving forward. And there it was again, that phrase. Moving forward. As if the past could be unstitched, as if memory were optional, as if we could fast forward through the part where I slept on concrete, through the hunger that gnawed on my ribs like rats in a cellar, through the rejection that bled from every unanswered call and every silent room. They all wanted to move forward, but none of them wanted to look back. I closed the letter and placed it back into the envelope. Not torn, not discarded. I would keep it, like all the others, in a drawer I never opened except on nights like this, when the ghosts came calling, and I needed to remind myself that they were real, that I had not imagined it, that this pain had shape and name and voice. I stood and walked to the window, palms pressed against cool glass as I looked down over the city. Beneath me, a homeless man curled up on a bench, his body tucked in like someone trying to fold into non-existence. A security guard passed him without stopping. I knew that routine, knew the subtle shame of being seen and ignored in the same breath, knew the logic behind sleeping in places where you might be moved just so someone would see you, validate you, prove that you hadn't vanished entirely. That used to be me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small silver coin. It wasn't real currency, just a token I'd kept since the early days of Ash and Ember. I had created it as part of a branding gimmick, a reminder to clients that transformation was possible. One side was etched with fire, the other with roots. From burnt to bloom, it said. I'd given it to clients when we completed major projects, a symbol of their own evolution. But I had kept one for myself. Mine. The original. I stared at it in the lamplight, letting it glint in the silence, then flipped it once, catching it before it fell. I never looked at the side it landed on. That wasn't the point. The next morning came wrapped in clouds, a thick, brooding sky that threatened rain, but never delivered. I arrived at the office early, before the staff, before the sun had fully risen. Coffee in hand, I sat at my desk and began drafting an email. Not to family, to myself. A kind of private log I kept, like a captain's journal. I used it to pour the thoughts that didn't belong in boardrooms or marketing meetings. Today's entry began with a single sentence. Success should not erase suffering. I paused after writing it. Let the words stare back at me. So many people wear their success like armor, shiny, impenetrable, a barrier between who they are and who they were. But I didn't want armor. I wanted scars. I wanted reminders. Because the moment I forgot the journey, I'd lose the only thing that made me different. The truth was, I hadn't started this company just to escape poverty. I started it to escape invisibility. There's something uniquely violent about being forgotten while still alive. It's a kind of death that doesn't stop your heart, but steals everything else. Your voice, your place, your proof of existence. And when my own family had participated in that forgetting, it changed something fundamental in me. I spent that afternoon reviewing applications for a new internship program we'd launched. One of them caught my eye, not for its qualifications, which were average at best, but for its personal essay. The applicant was 23, currently living in transitional housing, and had taught herself graphic design using free software at a public library. She ended her essay with a line that lodged itself into my chest. I just want someone to believe in me long enough to become someone worth believing in. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. That had been me, almost word for word. And just like that, the decision was made. I called my assistant, told her to schedule an interview with the applicant for the next morning and to make sure she was offered bus fare if she needed it, because no one had done that for me, and it mattered. Later that week, I visited the same diner where I used to sneak napkins and pretend to be a customer. I didn't go often, not because of shame, but because it held too much. The smells, the colors, the way the light filtered through the blinds all triggered something deep, something heavy. But I went anyway. Sat in the same corner booth I once napped in when the staff wasn't paying attention, and ordered a coffee and the biggest meal on the menu. Halfway through, the waitress recognized me. She wasn't one of the original staff, but she'd seen the article in the local paper, the story about the designer who rose from the streets. I could tell by her smile that she wasn't sure if she should mention it. When I nodded, she relaxed and said something about how inspiring it was. Inspiring. That word. Everyone used it, as if my life were a movie montage, a fast-forwarded triumph rather than a years-long war, as if hunger could be inspiring, as if abandonment made you poetic instead of permanently altered. Before leaving, I tipped her $100 and wrote a note on the back of the receipt. Not everyone gets a second chance. Help them when they do. I didn't sign it. That night I couldn't sleep. The letter from my mother kept creeping into my thoughts, dragging its carefully constructed regrets and subtle manipulations with it. I wanted to throw it away, burn it, forget it. But I couldn't, because part of me still wanted her to mean it, still wanted someone to explain why they hadn't come looking, why the people who were supposed to love me had watched me disappear and never asked where I'd gone. I got out of bed and stood by the window watching the city pulse under streetlights. It was a cruel comfort. Beautiful in the way wild animals are beautiful, indifferent, powerful, alive. And then I said it aloud for the first time. I forgive you. It didn't feel like a revelation. It didn't feel healing. It felt like cutting an anchor off your leg after you've already learned how to swim with it. A practical decision, nothing more. But it was a start. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It didn't mean they were owed a place in my life, my business, or my legacy. It meant I refused to carry the extra weight of their silence any longer. The next morning, I opened the envelope again, took out the letter, and carefully folded it into a different drawer. One marked history, not hope. I made a note to call my therapist later that week, not because I was breaking, but because I wasn't, and because I wanted to keep it that way. In the weeks that followed, I hired the intern. Her name was Kiara. She reminded me of myself, sharp-eyed, skeptical, too proud to ask for help, but smart enough to accept it when offered. I didn't tell her about my past. I let her discover it on her own, through research, whispers, the occasional slip during conversation. What mattered wasn't where I'd been. What mattered was that she knew someone believed in her now. Because that's what I'd needed once. And maybe, just maybe, believing in someone before they've earned it is the closest thing to love that isn't conditional. Success didn't silence the past, it amplified it. It gave it a microphone, turned up the volume, made the memories sharper, more defined. Every milestone I reached, every new contract signed, every glowing review or media feature, they were all followed by the faint, echoing question that would not go away. Where were they when it mattered? Time had not dulled the blade. If anything, it had only clarified the shape of it. The blade was not made of hate, not even resentment. It was made of truth, and truth has no mercy for sentiment. Ash and Ember Design Company had become more than a business. It had grown into a movement. We weren't just taking on clients, we were changing narratives. Our latest campaign with a national housing nonprofit had gone viral. It was real, gritty, raw. It didn't sanitize the face of homelessness or wrap it in the safe colors of philanthropy. It told the truth. It told my truth. Not by name, not explicitly, but the tone was unmistakable. I watched it spread across the internet like wildfire, people sharing it with captions like, "This hit me hard," or "Finally, someone said it." The irony was that while the world finally started to understand what I'd gone through, my own family still didn't. That week, I received an invitation. Not a business proposal, not a plea for collaboration, an actual invitation. My brother was getting married. He'd met someone, fallen in love, and now they were planning a sprawling, expensive wedding upstate. The kind with manicured lawns, curated playlists, personalized mocktails, and a guest list designed for maximum social capital. And apparently I was honored to be invited. The envelope was thick, cream again, foil-stamped names, a reply card with meal options and seating preferences, a note scrawled across the bottom in pen. "Would mean a lot if you came. Let's make peace." I stared at it for a long time. Let's make peace. As if peace were a handshake passed across a linen-covered table. As if it didn't require blood to be acknowledged. As if they didn't owe me more than just a seat at the table. They owed me memory. They owed me the truth. But then, I asked myself the question I'd avoided all these years. What would peace look like if it didn't mean forgetting? So I went. Not because I wanted to be part of their celebration. Not because I'd forgiven in the way they hoped. I went because I was no longer haunted by the past. I was shaped by it, sure, branded by it, but it no longer dictated my direction. And I needed to know, once and for all, what would come of facing them, not as the broken, desperate outcast, but as the version of myself I had become. The venue was everything I expected. White tents stretching across emerald lawns, glass lanterns hanging from tree branches, music drifting through the air like expensive perfume. I arrived alone, dressed in a charcoal suit that had cost more than my entire life savings during those first lean years. People noticed me. Some recognized me from news articles or online interviews. Others only saw the cut of the suit, the confidence, the posture of someone who had stopped explaining their worth. My mother found me first. She approached slowly, cautiously, like I might disappear if she came too fast. Her hair was silver now, curled tight and pinned with precision. She wore navy silk and the kind of pearls that were more performative than sentimental. Her face, however, looked older than I remembered. Not in years, but in weight. Regret, maybe, or realization. "You came," she said with a weak smile. I nodded. "I wasn't sure you would," she continued, "but I'm glad. Really, I am." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch until she filled it. "I know. I wasn't there. Back then. I didn't know what to do. I was scared and angry, and I thought I was helping by pushing you to be practical, to survive. I finally looked her in the eyes. I didn't need you to be practical. I needed you to believe I would make it. She winced, but she didn't argue. That was progress. I'm sorry, she said, and I believed her. I didn't believe it made things better, didn't believe it rewrote anything, but I believed she meant it, and that was enough. The ceremony was picturesque, the kind of wedding people write magazine features about. My brother looked happy, genuinely, and in that moment, I realized something strange. I didn't hate him. I didn't even resent him, because I had stopped expecting anything from him a long time ago. That was freedom. The freedom of lowered expectations, of no longer needing closure because you had built your own. After the ceremony, we talked. We stood beneath a tree, green tea in hand, the noise of the reception drifting around us like white noise. I know we weren't there, he said, and I know we don't deserve anything from you now. But you being here, it means something, even if it's just one day. It's not one day, I replied quietly. It's the end of a chapter. He nodded, not quite understanding, but accepting it. And that was enough. I left early before the dancing started. No long goodbyes, no promises of more. Just a quiet exit. The way I'd always done things. Back at my apartment, I lit a candle. Not for ritual, not for symbolism. Just because I liked the way it flickered in the dark. I poured a glass of tea and sat by the window, the city glittering below like a map made of fire and desire. And I thought about the journey. From hunger to abundance. From invisibility to legacy. From abandoned to self-defined. They had wanted to invest in my success, not knowing that the most valuable stock had already been bought and paid for by my own suffering. They wanted a stake in the outcome, blind to the fact that the outcome had never been for them. It had been for me. For those like me. For the forgotten, the dismissed, the left behind. Ash and Ember was no longer just a name. It was the answer. To every question they never asked. To every cry they never heard. To every silence that screamed in the cold. And now it stood, tall, unshakable, unapologetic, not just a business, but a monument, to resilience, to memory, to me. And in the soft hush of that final night, I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I had finished it.